Hello, everyone, and welcome. So, have you ever stopped to think about how our daily actions, when you multiply them by billions of people, are actually changing our entire planet? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. We're going to explore the massive, and I mean massive, impact humans have on the environment, an impact that touches everything from the air we breathe to the food we eat. So, to kick things off, let's talk about a really big idea. A lot of scientists are now calling the time we live in the Anthropocene. It's a fancy word, but it basically just means the age of humans. And why is that? Because for the first time in Earth's 4.5 billion year history, one single species, that's us, humanity, has become the main force shaping our world's climate and environment. This idea is pretty much the foundation for everything we're about to discuss. And this all leads us to the big question we'll be tackling. How do we even get to this point? We're going to trace the whole story of how human society has evolved and see exactly how each major shift affected our planet. So try to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go through everything. To help us answer that, here's a quick roadmap of what we'll cover. We'll start with a journey through different human societies, then we'll look at how cities and factories popped up. We'll also get into some of the hidden costs of all this progress, like health risks, and then we'll tackle the huge challenges of food and energy. And, of course, at the end, we'll wrap it all up in a neat summary to make revision super easy for you. First up, let's take a little trip back in time. You see, to really understand our impact today, we need to see just how much our way of life has completely transformed over the centuries. We're talking from the earliest human groups all the way to the factory-filled nations we see today. Generally, you can think of human society evolving in three big leaps. For most of our history, we were hunter-gatherers, just living off the land. Then, about 10,000 years ago, something huge happened. We invented farming, and that changed everything. And finally, the Industrial Revolution kicked off in the 18th century, which put us on the fast track to the modern world. Each of these stages totally changed our relationship with the environment. This table here kind of lays out some of the key differences. Just look at the hunting-gathering societies. They were small, and for the most part, people were pretty equal. But as we moved into farming and then industry, you can see that societies got way bigger and wealthier, but you also start to see a lot more social inequality. Let's take a closer look at each one. So, early humans lived in these small groups that were always on the move. Just picture it, constantly following the seasons and the animals to find food. Because they never stayed put, they didn't really own a lot of stuff. And life was pretty simple, revolving around family. Their impact on the environment? It was tiny, almost nothing. Now, the first real game changer was agriculture. Once people figured out how to grow their own crops and raise animals, they didn't need to wander around anymore. They could settle down in one spot. This led to the first villages, then towns, and they could support much, much bigger populations. And while this was an amazing leap forward for humanity, it was also the beginning of us changing the environment on a really large scale. And then came industrialization. With the invention of powerful machines and the rise of factories, the scale of human activity just exploded. Suddenly, we could produce more, build more, and consume more than ever before in history. This brought about incredible progress, for sure, but it also came with a very steep price tag for the environment. We can really break down the environmental impact of this industrial age into four key areas. First, you've got pollution in our air, our water, and our soil. Second, the massive extraction of natural resources like coal, oil, and metals from the earth. Third, urbanization, which is just this huge movement of people into cities. And fourth, the unbelievable amount of waste and trash we started to produce. Okay, so now let's zoom in on how this industrial shift created the world we all recognize today, a world filled with giant cities and a constantly growing population. So why did cities get so big so fast? Well, it really just boils down to opportunity. The new factories needed workers, and that pulled people away from farms. Cities also offered better access to things like schools and hospitals. And this mass movement into cities is what we call urbanization. As you can probably guess, packing that many people into one place puts enormous pressure on a city's resources, like housing, clean water, and just getting around. This brings us to a super important idea, carrying capacity. Think of it like this. A lifeboat is only designed to hold a certain number of people, right? That's its carrying capacity. Well, the Earth is like our lifeboat, and it also has a limit, a maximum number of people it can support over the long term without being damaged. With our population boom, we are seriously testing, and in many parts of the world, we're already exceeding the Earth's carrying capacity. You know, this new industrial world didn't just affect the planet, it also created brand new dangers for the people working right in the middle of it. So let's talk about some of the hidden costs of progress, specifically something called occupational health hazards. These dangers pretty much fall into three main buckets. First, you have chemical hazards. So think about toxic fumes or dangerous liquids in a factory. Then there are biological hazards, which could be bacteria or viruses that people in jobs like healthcare might be exposed to. And finally, you have physical hazards, things like dangerously loud noise, extreme heat or cold, or even radiation. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about two of the biggest challenges we are grappling with right now, which are a direct result of how our society has developed. We're talking about making sure we have enough food and enough energy for a world with nearly 8 billion people. When we talk about food security, it's not just about having enough food somewhere on the planet. It actually rests on three pillars. The first is availability. Is there actually enough food being produced? The second is access. Can people physically get to the food and can they afford it? And the third is utilization. Is the food nutritious and can people's bodies actually use it properly? If any one of those pillars fails, you have a problem. And in a very similar way, we're facing a global energy crisis. I mean, our entire modern world runs on energy, but the way we've been getting it is becoming a huge problem. So what's really going on here? Well, this crisis really comes from a few big problems that are all tangled together. First, we are way too dependent on old-school fossil fuels like coal and oil, which are running out. At the same time, our population keeps growing and our lifestyles demand more and more energy every year. This means we're overusing these resources, and the pollution from burning them is causing some really severe environmental damage. So what's the solution? Well, there's no magic wand, but the path forward is becoming pretty clear. We have to get much smarter and more efficient with the energy we use, while at the same time making a major shift over to renewable energy sources, things like solar, wind, and hydropower. All right, we have covered a ton of ground. We've gone from ancient societies all the way to our complex modern world and its biggest challenges. So now, let's pull it all together with a quick summary to help you lock in the key takeaways for your revision. So, let's sum it all up. What's the bottom line? It's this. Human activity is now the #1 cause of the environmental problems we see today. The biggest issues are things like pollution, deforestation, overpopulation, and just wasting our precious natural resources. To find any real solutions, we have to understand how our society, our economy, and the environment are all deeply connected. Learning how to manage these connections, well, that's the essential challenge of our time. For more clear explanations and daily IGNOU videos, subscribe to IGNOU Mind Decoded.